named a number of things over the years. It was originally Western Recorders, I believe, was the first name. When Frank Sinatra helped finance building it, it was an old supermarket on the corner here, just in a little bit east of Gower.
For decades, Dwight Yoakam has been a name that instantly conjures up memories of raw Bakersfield country, rhinestone-flared suits, and a voice that could slice through any smoky barroom. He was the renegade who brought honky-tonk back into fashion at a time when Nashville was steering toward polished pop. His music was fearless, his style unmistakable, and his refusal to bend to industry trends made him an icon. But today, Dwight's name is back in the headlines for reasons that aren't about new chart-topping records or movie roles. The country legend is facing questions, rumors, and heartbreaking truths that have fans both worried and nostalgic. How did the once untouchable cowboy of country music end up here? And what do the latest revelations really mean for his legacy? Before Dwight Yoakam became a chart-topping star, he was just a boy from Pikeville, Kentucky, born in 1956, with a restless spirit and a love for the old sounds of Hank Williams, Buck Owens, and Johnny Cash. His family moved to Columbus, Ohio when he was young, and that's where he first began to realize music was not just entertainment. It was his escape. He taught himself guitar, devoured country and rock records, and even in high school, he was performing with local garage bands. But what made Dwight different was his refusal to abandon the twang of old-school honky-tonk when everyone else was moving toward softer, radio-friendly styles. By the mid-1970s, Dwight had set his sights on Nashville, the so-called heart of country music. Yet, Nashville wasn't ready for him. Executives told him flat out his music was too raw and too California. They wanted glossy, safe country stars, not a lean cowboy in tight jeans, a low-slung hat, and a piercing voice that brought Bakersfield grit back into the mainstream. Nashville doors slammed shut in his face, but Dwight didn't see rejection. He saw opportunity. If Nashville wouldn't have him, he'd take his music where it could breathe. That meant Los Angeles, a city better known for rock and roll and punk than country twang. In Los Angeles, Dwight began playing the gritty club circuit, often on bills with punk and rock bands. To outsiders, the pairing looked strange, but it was genius. Young audiences hungry for something authentic connected instantly to Dwight's sound. His stripped-down, rebellious country blended perfectly with the raw energy of the rock scene. By 1984, he had built a loyal following, and soon his self-financed EP guitars, Cadillacs, etc., caught the attention of Warner Reprise Records. When the album was reissued nationally in 1986, it was nothing short of a revolution. The title track stormed the charts. Honky Tonk Man resurrected a Johnny Horton classic, and critics hailed Dwight as a savior of real country music. He wasn't just another singer, he was a force of nature. His debut went double platinum, unheard of for a so-called outsider. Suddenly, the boy Nashville had rejected was outselling many of its biggest names. The hits kept coming. Hillbilly Deluxe in 1987, Buenas Noches from a Lonely Room in 1988, which gave him his first #1 singles with Streets of Bakersfield, a duet with Buck Owens himself, and I Sang Dixie. Dwight wasn't only paying tribute to his heroes, he was reviving them, giving Buck Owens and the Bakersfield sound a second life. By the early 1990s, Dwight was one of the hottest acts in country music, his albums going multi-platinum, his concerts packed with fans who had never seen a cowboy move and sing quite like him. And yet, it wasn't just the music. Dwight Yoakam had style. The skin-tight jeans, the ever-present cowboy hat tilted low, the fusion of honky-tonk twang with a rebellious swagger. It all made him an icon, not just in country, but in pop culture. Even Rolling Stone praised him, calling him a rare breed of country star who could win over critics and cowboys alike. Still, Dwight's rise wasn't without its costs. He pushed himself relentlessly, recording, touring, and fighting to prove he wasn't a fluke. The intensity of his climb set the stage for both his greatest successes and the personal struggles that would haunt him in later years. But for now, in the mid to late 1980s, Dwight Yoakam was unstoppable, rewriting the rules of Nashville from outside its walls and forcing the entire industry to pay attention. Dwight Yoakam's success in music was undeniable, but unlike many of his country peers, he was never content to remain confined to the world of honky-tonk and jukeboxes. By the early 1990s, he had already conquered the charts, sold millions of albums, and built a reputation as one of the sharpest performers in the business. But Dwight had another dream: Hollywood. His rugged looks, sharp cheekbones, and ability to command a stage made him a natural fit for the big screen. What few knew at the time, however, was that Dwight had been fascinated with acting long before he became a country star. He studied theater in college, and even as he was performing in dive bars, he often imagined himself one day stepping into the world of cinema. Hollywood eventually came calling, and when it did, Dwight proved he was more than ready. In 1996, he delivered a chilling performance as Doyle Hargraves in Billy Bob Thornton's Sling Blade. The role stunned critics and audiences alike. Gone was the charming cowboy crooner. In his place was a menacing, abusive stepfather whose presence dominated every scene. Dwight's ability to embody such a dark and complex character earned him widespread acclaim and solidified his position as not just a singer dabbling in acting, but a serious actor in his own right. Roles followed in Panic Room alongside Jodie Foster, The Newton Boys with Matthew McConaughey, and Crank with Jason Statham. Each performance revealed another side of Dwight, showing that his artistry extended well beyond country music. Yet, as his film career blossomed, his personal life was far less smooth. Dwight, the man who seemed larger than life on stage, struggled deeply with matters of the heart. He was famously private, rarely discussing his relationships publicly, but whispers of broken romances followed him wherever he went. His long-term relationship with actress Sharon Stone ended amid heavy media speculation, and other rumored romances never seemed to last. Behind the scenes, Dwight faced the same heartbreak and loneliness that his songs so often described. Friends close to him described a man who gave everything to his craft, but often at the expense of lasting love and stability. The road was a demanding mistress, and the pressures of balancing a booming music career with the demands of Hollywood left little room for peace in his personal life. Still, Dwight channeled that pain into his work. His songs during this era carried a haunting quality, filled with the ache of loneliness and the sharp edges of regret. Tracks like 1,000 Miles from Nowhere weren't just hits. They were confessions set to music, glimpses into the heart of a man who could command arenas yet return to empty hotel rooms when the lights went out. His growing reputation as both a musician and actor expanded his fame, but it also made him more isolated. Hollywood circles were far different from the honky-tonk crowds that had first embraced him, and Dwight often found himself straddling two worlds, never fully at home in either. On the outside, Dwight Yoakam appeared to be a man who had it all: chart success, critical acclaim, movie roles, and a public image of confidence and charisma. But on the inside, the struggle for genuine connection weighed heavily on him. Hollywood brought him new opportunities, but it also highlighted just how much fame could take from a man. The same spotlight that made him a legend also cast long shadows of loneliness, heartbreak, and pressure. By the late 1990s and early 2000s, Dwight Yoakam had built a career that most artists could only dream of. Multi-platinum albums, chart-topping singles, critical acclaim, and a blossoming acting career seemed to cement him as one of the most versatile performers of his generation. Yet, just as his star seemed brightest, the spotlight on Dwight began to dim. Unlike many of his peers who clung tightly to fame, Dwight quietly began stepping back. He wasn't releasing albums at the same feverish pace. Concert tours that once drew massive crowds became less frequent, and his once constant presence on radio and television began to fade. For fans who had followed him from his Bakersfield revival days to his Hollywood roles, the silence was deafening. Many began to wonder, where had Dwight Yoakam gone? Part of the answer lay in the natural evolution of music itself. Country radio, by the early 2000s, was moving in a new direction. Slick, pop-infused acts dominated the charts, and Dwight's hard-edged, honky-tonk style suddenly felt like an outlier again. The same industry that once embraced him began turning its back, chasing after younger, more polished stars. But Dwight had never been one to chase trends. Rather than compromise his sound, he chose distance. Instead of bending to Nashville or to the new wave of country, he took a step back from the relentless grind that had consumed his life for decades. Another factor was his health and personal well-being. Years of touring, performing, and living under the pressures of fame had taken a toll on his body and spirit. Though he never openly discussed serious health issues, fans noticed that he looked thinner, sometimes tired, and less energetic than in his earlier years. Rumors swirled, but Dwight never fed into them. He remained silent, leaving speculation to swirl unchecked. What many didn't realize was that Dwight was also pouring more energy into his private life. For so long, he had been defined by his public persona: the skinny jeans, the low-brimmed cowboy hat, the voice that could break hearts. But behind the scenes, he was seeking stability, connection, and a sense of peace that years in the spotlight had denied him. In 2020, Dwight surprised fans by marrying his longtime partner, Emily Joyce, in an intimate ceremony. The announcement shocked many, not only because Dwight had been so private about his personal relationships, but also because the wedding took place just as the world was shutting down due to the COVID-19 pandemic. In true Dwight fashion, it was a move that was quiet, personal, and free from the glare of cameras. During these silent years, Dwight wasn't completely gone. He would still surface occasionally, making cameo appearances, performing select shows, or releasing projects that reminded the world of his undeniable talent. But compared to the firestorm of his earlier career, these appearances were rare, almost like whispers of a man who once dominated the charts. For his most loyal fans, every new appearance was both a joy and a reminder of how much they missed him. Yet to Dwight, the silence was intentional. He had lived life at full throttle for decades, and now he seemed to be reclaiming his time, his peace, and perhaps his health. Still, for the public, silence invites speculation. Why had Dwight Yoakam, one of country music's most iconic figures, chosen to retreat from the spotlight at the height of his powers? Was it a conscious choice for happiness, or a forced step back brought on by struggles the public couldn't see? For years, Dwight Yoakam's retreat from the spotlight was treated as nothing more than a country legend taking his well-earned rest. Fans respected his privacy, even as they longed for more albums, more tours, and more of the firebrand energy that had defined his career. But recently, that silence has been broken, not by Dwight himself, but by the headlines. Stories began to surface that caught the attention of both the country music community and Hollywood press. These weren't the typical stories of new projects or industry awards. Instead, they carried a darker weight. Rumors swirled of Dwight struggling with health issues, whispers of canceled appearances, and speculation that he might not be able to return to the stage in the way fans hoped. Though not all reports have been confirmed, the tone of the headlines has shifted dramatically. What once was a celebration of his career has now become a wave of concern. Dwight, the man who seemed invincible in his prime, was suddenly being painted as fragile. It is a narrative that fans were not prepared for, and one that has left many heartbroken. The timing of these stories only deepened the impact. With Dwight now in his late 60s, the reality that even legends age began to sink in. Photos of him appearing thinner or looking less like the spry cowboy of the 1980s were circulated online, each one fueling speculation. Concertgoers shared accounts of shows where Dwight seemed fatigued, his movements more measured, his energy a little dimmer. While many defended him, arguing that age alone explains the changes, the headlines latched onto a narrative of decline. Some outlets even suggested that Dwight had quietly been battling illnesses, though no official confirmation was given. Beyond health, other stories emerged that painted a picture of a man grappling with the very thing he had once embraced: privacy. Reporters noted how fiercely Dwight guarded his personal life, and with each new rumor, his silence only added fuel to the fire. By refusing to address speculation, Dwight left fans and media alike to fill in the blanks, often in the most dramatic fashion possible. But perhaps the most shocking of all was the way these headlines struck at the heart of his legacy. For decades, Dwight Yoakam was synonymous with toughness, rebellion, and resilience. He was the country singer who outsmarted Nashville, the actor who shocked Hollywood with raw performances, the icon who seemed untouchable. To see his name now tied to stories of frailty and uncertainty felt like a betrayal of the image fans had carried for so long. Yet, in a way, the headlines also revealed something deeper: that Dwight Yoakam, like all legends, is human. He has lived a life of relentless performance, constant reinvention, and decades under the weight of expectation. The cracks showing now may not be weakness, but rather the inevitable price of a career lived at full tilt. Still, for fans, the shift was jarring. The man they once saw as a cowboy who could never be broken was suddenly a subject of sympathy, worry, and speculation. Headlines that once celebrated his triumphs now read like obituaries in waiting, a painful reminder that even legends cannot outrun time. For many, it wasn't just shocking, it was heartbreaking. As the headlines mounted, one theme began to dominate them all: Dwight Yoakam's health. For a man who had always kept his personal life hidden behind a curtain of silence, the sudden swirl of speculation was both unusual and unsettling. Fans who once eagerly awaited news of new albums or surprise film roles now found themselves combing through reports, interviews, and grainy concert footage for clues about his well-being. Rumors ranged from the mild to the alarming. Some outlets suggested he was simply worn down from decades of touring, pointing to his relentless schedule during the height of his fame. Others hinted at more serious ailments, with whispers of illness circulating through fan forums and social media. The truth was rarely clear, and Dwight himself offered no confirmation, choosing instead to remain silent. But sometimes, silence can speak louder than words. When a string of scheduled performances was quietly canceled or postponed, the speculation only intensified. Fans who had bought tickets months in advance were left disappointed, often told little more than unforeseen circumstances or scheduling conflicts as explanations. In the past, Dwight had been known for his professionalism and commitment to his craft. He wasn't the type of artist to leave fans waiting without good reason. The sudden cancellations were out of character, and that made people worry. Those who did see him perform in recent years noticed subtle changes. Longtime fans commented that while his voice still carried that haunting twang, his energy on stage was not the same. He moved more slowly, sometimes seemed short of breath, and leaned heavily on the microphone stand. Others insisted it was nothing more than age catching up to him. After all, Dwight was now approaching 70, and few performers could match the fire of their youth forever. But in a world obsessed with images and first impressions, the smallest change was enough to spark rumor after rumor. Social media amplified these concerns in ways that earlier generations of stars never faced. A single photo of Dwight looking tired could spread across platforms in minutes, accompanied by captions of speculation and fear. Hashtags like "Pray for Dwight" began appearing, with fans sharing their love and memories, hoping their words of encouragement might somehow reach him. Some even began recounting personal stories of how his music had helped them through their own hardships, turning his rumored struggles into a collective outpouring of gratitude. It wasn't just fans who noticed either. Industry insiders, musicians, and even former collaborators weighed in, some expressing concern, others calling for privacy. A few defended Dwight fiercely, reminding the world that speculation without facts can be more damaging than the truth itself. Yet the lack of any official statement only left a vacuum for more theories to grow. In many ways, the health rumors surrounding Dwight Yoakam reflect the double-edged sword of fame. The very fans who love him most also feel a sense of ownership over his story, desperate to know the truth, even when that truth may not be theirs to have. And while the concern is genuine, the headlines, the photos, and the speculation risk overshadowing the man himself, the artist whose music gave voice to loneliness, heartbreak, and resilience long before his own struggles became the subject of public debate. What fans feared most wasn't just the possibility of illness. It was the thought that the cowboy who once seemed larger than life might soon be forced to hang up his hat. For much of his career, Dwight Yoakam was a mystery. Unlike many country stars who freely opened up about marriages, divorces, or personal drama, Dwight kept his private life locked away. The hat pulled low over his face wasn't just a stage accessory, it was a shield, a barrier between the world and the man beneath it. He granted interviews, but always on his own terms. Questions about his relationships were brushed aside, and details about his family were rarely shared. This guarded nature only deepened the curiosity surrounding him, especially as the headlines about his health began to spread. Suddenly, fans weren't just asking about Dwight the artist. They wanted to know who Dwight the man really was. Over the years, whispers of romances with famous actresses like Sharon Stone and Bridget Fonda circulated, but Dwight never confirmed much. He seemed to drift in and out of relationships, rarely staying long enough for the public to get a clear picture of his personal commitments. Many speculated that the demands of his career left little room for love, while others believed Dwight deliberately kept intimacy at arm's length to protect himself from heartbreak. What is known is that Dwight was fiercely loyal to the people he considered friends. Stories from those who worked with him paint a picture of a man who, while sometimes moody and distant, was also capable of deep kindness and generosity. Band members recalled how he fought for fair pay for his crew, ensuring they were treated with respect. Film colleagues noted that despite his intimidating on-screen characters, off-screen he often showed humility, listening more than he spoke. In 2020, Dwight surprised everyone by announcing his marriage to longtime partner Emily Joyce. The ceremony was private, intimate, and carefully timed, taking place just before COVID-19 restrictions went into effect. The revelation stunned fans, not only because Dwight had never spoken publicly about Emily, but also because it suggested that after decades of wandering, he had finally found a stable anchor. Later that same year, the couple welcomed their first child, a son, into the world. For fans, this was both heartwarming and bittersweet. Dwight, the eternal bachelor, had finally become a husband and father. But just as the world was celebrating this new chapter, the headlines of health struggles and retreat from the spotlight cast a shadow over the joy. Family life seemed to bring Dwight a quiet fulfillment, one he had long searched for but never embraced, publicly. Friends close to him have hinted that fatherhood softened him, giving him a new sense of purpose outside the endless grind of music and fame. Yet even in this new role, Dwight remained intensely private. No photos of his child were shared with the press, and public appearances with Emily were rare. Fans respected this choice, though many longed for a glimpse into the domestic life of the man who had so long sung about loneliness and heartache. His reclusive nature also meant that friends became gatekeepers of his story. Some defended his silence as his right, while others admitted that even they were sometimes left in the dark about his struggles. Dwight's inner circle has always been small, and in the age of constant exposure, that has only added to his mystique. For fans, the realization that Dwight's true self was largely hidden from the world was both frustrating and fascinating. They had his music, songs that revealed his pain, his joy, his vulnerability, but the man behind those songs remained elusive. As the headlines of health battles and cancellations grew louder, the questions about his private life became more urgent. Who was caring for him? How was his family handling the pressure? Would he open up at last, or continue to let silence speak for him? For a man who built his career on raw honesty in song, but guarded privacy in life, Dwight's family and friends remain the missing pieces of a puzzle fans may never fully solve. When fans talk about Dwight Yoakam, the conversation always circles back to the music, long before the headlines of health concerns or private struggles. Dwight built a career on songs that cut straight to the bone. His music wasn't just entertainment, it was truth, carried in a voice that was sharp, haunting, and instantly recognizable. Even now, with his future uncertain, that catalog stands as a monument to what he gave to country music. His debut album, Guitars, Cadillacs, etc., etc., didn't just announce a new star, it shook Nashville to its core. Songs like Honky Tonk Man and Guitars, Cadillacs weren't polished for radio consumption. They were raw, unfiltered echoes of a bygone era delivered with a modern energy. Dwight reminded the industry of its roots at a time when those roots were being buried under glossy production. He made old-school country feel dangerous again, and the public couldn't get enough. His follow-ups proved he wasn't a one-album wonder. Hillbilly Deluxe, Buenas Noches from a Lonely Room, and If There Was a Way each pushed his artistry further. I Sang Dixie became a mournful anthem, while Streets of Bakersfield, with Buck Owens, bridged generations and gave new life to a sound many had dismissed as outdated. Dwight wasn't imitating his heroes. He was elevating them, weaving their spirit into something fresh. By the 1990s, his catalog was stacked with songs that have since become staples of country playlists. 1,000 Miles from Nowhere captured the ache of isolation. Fast as You blended honky-tonk with rock swagger. Even his covers, like Elvis Presley's Suspicious Minds, bore his unmistakable stamp. He took risks musically, straddling the line between tradition and innovation, and in doing so, he secured his place not just as a star, but as a trailblazer. What makes Dwight's music endure is its emotional honesty. He didn't just sing about heartbreak, he lived it in his voice. He didn't just write about loneliness, he made listeners feel it in their bones. Each track was a confession, a glimpse into the mind of a man who could fill arenas, yet understood the pain of being utterly alone. His music gave a voice to those who didn't have the words, and that is why it resonates decades later. His influence can be heard in countless modern artists who cite him as inspiration. Musicians from Chris Stapleton to Casey Musgraves have drawn from the blend of tradition and rebellion Dwight perfected. Even outside of country, rock bands and indie acts have covered his songs, proving that his reach extends far beyond Nashville. For fans, the catalog is not just a collection of hits. It is a lifeline, a record of moments when Dwight's words and melodies mirrored their own lives. From barroom jukeboxes to massive stadium speakers, his music became the soundtrack to heartbreaks, road trips, weddings, and long nights of solitude. That's why the recent headlines sting so deeply. The idea that Dwight might not return to the studio, that there may never be another album or tour, forces fans to confront the reality that the music he's already given might be all they'll ever have. It's a bittersweet comfort. The body of work is immense and timeless, but the hunger for more never fades. In the end, Dwight Yoakam's legacy will always be written in songs. Songs that revived Bakersfield, that kept honky-tonk alive, that blended country grit with rock energy. Songs that made millions feel understood. The headlines may tell one story about the man, but the music tells another, one that will never fade, no matter what comes next. As Dwight Yoakam's name continues to fill headlines, the question on every fan's mind is simple. What comes next? For decades, Dwight was the embodiment of forward momentum, a man who never stopped creating, performing, and reinventing himself. But now, with rumors swirling and his silence growing louder, the road ahead feels more uncertain than ever. Some believe Dwight may choose to retreat completely from the spotlight, spending the rest of his days focused on his wife Emily and their young son. After years of heartbreak, relentless touring, and the crushing demands of fame, the idea of Dwight finally embracing a quiet family life carries a poetic justice. Perhaps the cowboy has found the peace he once only sang about. Others hold out hope that he will return to the stage, even if only in small doses. They imagine intimate shows where Dwight, older and weathered, shares not just his greatest hits, but also the wisdom of a man who lived through every high and low the music industry could throw at him. There is power in vulnerability, and Dwight's music has always thrived on truth. A return, however modest, would not only heal fans' hearts, but also remind the world why his voice is irreplaceable. Yet the reality cannot be ignored. Dwight is no longer the unstoppable figure of the 1980s and 1990s. Time has reshaped him, as it does all legends. Health concerns, whether real or exaggerated, have cast a shadow over his future. The cancellations, the rare appearances, the subtle changes in his performances, all paint a picture of a man grappling with limits he once seemed immune to. For fans, this is perhaps the hardest truth to accept. They grew up believing Dwight was a cowboy who could never be broken. To see him vulnerable, to see him fragile, is to confront their own mortality reflected in his. And yet, even in uncertainty, Dwight Yoakam remains larger than life. His silence, frustrating though it may be, has only added to his mystique. Few artists could disappear for years and still command headlines with a single rumor. Few could keep fans clinging to every scrap of news, desperate for confirmation, for reassurance, for one more song. That is the power Dwight has always held, an unshakable grip on the hearts of those who loved him. The road ahead may also include something far more enduring than tours or albums: legacy. Dwight's impact on country music is already cemented. He revived Bakersfield when Nashville had abandoned it. He gave Buck Owens his second act. He showed a generation that country could be authentic and rebellious at the same time. His catalog will outlive the rumors, outlive the headlines, and outlive even the man himself. Young artists will continue to cover Guitars, Cadillacs, and 1,000 Miles from Nowhere. Fans will pass down his records to their children. And long after the latest headline fades, Dwight's music will still be spinning on turntables, streaming through speakers, and echoing in the voices of new singers inspired by him. Perhaps that is the greatest comfort for fans struggling with the uncertainty. Dwight Yoakam doesn't need to prove himself anymore. He has already given the world more than most could in 10 lifetimes. Whether he chooses to step back quietly into family life, return for a final bow on stage, or remain a mystery until the very end, his story is already written in the songs that shaped country music forever. For now, all anyone can do is wait, hope, and cherish the gift of his music. The headlines may stir fear, but Dwight's legacy is untouchable. The cowboy who once defied Nashville, who made honky-tonk dangerous again, and who carried the Bakersfield sound into the modern age, will never truly fade. His road ahead may be uncertain, but one truth remains: Dwight Yoakam has already carved his name into history, and no rumor, no silence, and no passage of time can ever erase it.